good afternoon, good evening, whatever. We can go jumbo, guten Abend, bonsoir, but we can also that is the call that chimpanzees make before they go to sleep in the evening. You hear it going from one side of the valley to the other, from one group of nests to the next. And I want to pick up with my talk this evening from where Zerai left off yesterday. He was talking about this amazing 3-year-old Australopithecine child, Salam. And we've also been hearing about the history, the family tree of mankind through DNA genetic profiling. And it was a paleontologist, the late Louis Leakey, who actually set me on the path for studying chimpanzees. And it was pretty extraordinary way back then. It's kind of commonplace now, but his argument was because he'd been searching for the fossilized remains of early humans in Africa, and you can tell an awful lot about what those beings looked like from the fossils, from the shape of the muscle attachments, something about the way they lived from the various artifacts found with them, but what about how they behaved? That's what he wanted to know. And of course, behavior doesn't fossilize. He argued, and now it's a fairly common theory, that if we found behavior patterns similar or the same in our closest living relatives, the great apes, and humans today, then maybe those behaviors were present in the ape-like, human-like ancestor some 7 million years ago, and therefore perhaps we had brought those characteristics with us from that ancient past. Well, if you look in textbooks today that deal with human evolution, you very often find people speculating about how early humans may have behaved based on the behavior of chimpanzees. They are more like us than any other living creature, and we've heard about that during this TED conference. So it remains for me to comment on the ways in which chimpanzees are so like us in certain aspects of their behavior. Every chimpanzee has his or her own personality. Of course, I gave them names. They can live to be 60 years or more, although we think most of them probably don't make it to 60 in the wild. Mr. Wurzel. The female has her first baby when she's 11 or 12. Thereafter, she has one baby only every 5 or 6 years, a long period of childhood dependency when the child is nursing, sleeping with the mother at night, and riding on her back. And we believe that this long period of childhood is important for chimpanzees just as it is for us in relation to learning. As the brain becomes ever more complex during evolution in different forms of animals, so we find that learning plays an ever more important role in individuals' life history. And young chimpanzees spend a lot of time watching what their elders do. We know now that they're capable of imitating behaviors that they see, and we believe that it's in this way that the different tool-using behaviors that have now been seen in all the different chimpanzee populations studied in Africa, how these are passed from one generation to the next through observation, imitation, and practice, so that we can describe these tool-using behaviors as primitive culture. Chimpanzees don't have spoken language. We've talked about that. They do have a very rich repertoire of postures and gestures, many of which are similar or even identical to ours and be formed in the same context. Greeting chimpanzees, embracing. They also kiss, hold hands, pat one another on the back, and they swagger and they throw rocks. In chimpanzee society, we find many examples of compassion, precursors to love, and true altruism. Unfortunately, they, like us, have a dark side to their nature. They're capable of extreme brutality, even a kind of primitive war. And these really aggressive behaviors, for the most part, are directed against individuals of the neighboring social group. They are very territorially aggressive. chimpanzees, I believe, more than any other living creature, has helped us to understand that, after all, there is no sharp line between humans and the rest of the animal kingdom. It's a very blurry line, and it's getting more blurry all the time as we make even more observations. The study that I began in 1960 is still continuing to this day. And these chimpanzees living their complex social lives in the wild have helped more than anything else to make us realize we are part of and not separated from the amazing animals with whom we share the planet. So it's pretty sad to find that chimpanzees, like so many other creatures around the world, are losing their habitats. This is just one photograph from the air, and it shows you the forested highlands of Gombe. And it was when I flew over the whole area about 16 years ago and realized that outside the park, this forest, which in 1960 had stretched almost unbroken along the eastern shore of Lake Tanganyika, which is where the tiny 30-square-mile Gombe National Park lies, that a question came to my mind: how can we even try to save these famous chimpanzees when the people living around the national park are struggling to survive? More people living there than the land could possibly support. The numbers increased by refugees pouring in from Burundi and over the lake from Congo. And very poor people, they couldn't afford to buy food for elsewhere. This led to a program which we call Take Care. It's a very holistic way of improving the lives of the people living in the villages around the park. It started small with 12 villages. It's now in 24. There isn't time to go into it, but it's including things like tree nurseries, methods of farming most suitable to this now very degraded, almost desert-like land up in these mountains, ways of controlling, preventing soil erosion, ways of reclaiming overused farmland so that within 2 years they can again be productive, working to